Well, as we begin this grand, I'm just going to call it a pilgrimage because I feel like I've made a pilgrimage to come here to Bunny Williams' home. So iconic to me for many, many years and for many, many reasons. But we're going to start out, we got a map, and we're going to start out now with the approach up to the pool house, which is like a rustic Greek revival structure that you do not see it from the house. It was very much, as she describes, a place of destination. She didn't want to be able to see it during the winter time from the house. But what I love is the way she took something that was absolutely classic architecturally, a nod to the area and the architecture in the area, the architecture of her home, but then she put the twist on it, and it is all done in rustic woods with appointments of pine cones, all speaking the language of the wooded garden and her woodland garden. And so you can see it up here. It sits up high on a hill as a Greek revival structure would do, I guess, in Athens or someplace like that. So the situation, how it is positioned on and in the landscape is absolutely wonderful. But as compelling as that is, let's take a moment. We don't want to ignore what we are walking amongst, and we are walking through the orchard. The approach is through the orchard. If I understand it correctly, these are wildflowers that are in bloom at different times of year underneath the canopy of the orchard. It in and of itself is just completely, completely magical. And then when you come up at the crest, you see the structure itself. Well, you've heard that expression, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, here it was the desire to have a pool that came first. Bunny's husband, John, said that he wanted to have a pool, again, at some distance from the house. And it was John who identified these massive stones surrounding the perimeter of the pool itself, absolutely gorgeous. And that kind of, I guess, then dictated that they had to have a pool to use these beautiful, massive stones. Bunny talks about it in our interview. And then because the pool was a destination, it wasn't contiguous to the home itself, there had to be a structure here to serve as a pool house. The pool house has it has a small kitchen, it has restrooms, it is a living space in and of itself, separate and apart from the rest of the property. It's really, really beautiful. As a friend of mine said, you could sit here in these chairs, you could overlook the property, you can also sit at any depth on the varying stages of the steps that go down into the pool, and you can feel completely submersed, not only in the pool, but also in this section of the property, which is absolutely magnificent. Okay, this may be a pool house, and it may be away from the main house, but nevertheless, it has all of the comforts of home. There's a dining space here. There's even dog beds. There's a living room area, a big fireplace, which I think is so important to make this area livable and also really expand its ability to be used throughout the 4 seasons. I love the scale. Everything here is just so appropriately in scale. The massive stone fireplace, the stag that is just wonderful as an appointment on the mantle itself. The lanterns, the wicker, it speaks a language of the outdoors. It speaks a language of the woods. It feels very much Hobbit-like. And well, let's just say I could live here. Well, as we leave the rustic Greek revival pool house. We are then going to take the path and we're going to approach the studio. And again, I don't want to miss out on anything along the way. So look at this magnificent sculpture. Our friend Roger would absolutely adore this. I'm sure it's probably from a local artisan. Maybe we can find out more about that. But then the path is the approach to the beautiful courtyard that is in the foreground of her studio, which apparently she spent a great amount of time in during COVID. She restored it right before COVID, and happily it was done in time for her to, I guess, kind of take her sabbatical of sorts, enforced sabbatical here on her property in this beautiful studio. And I can already feel myself swooning over these dogwoods. I mean, first of all, that they're still in bloom. Anything in Oklahoma, certainly not comparable. Any of the dogwoods we would have in bloom would be long done by now. And it looks like she's got a huge hedge of what I am guessing are Annabelle hydrangeas right here that are getting ready to come into bloom. At my cottage garden, these are already in full bloom and probably going to be waning. And then this is one of the things that she was talking about, that tension between the structural and the architectural, and then the blousy ebullience of the things growing in the foreground or in the background. Really, really beautiful. Use of all organic materials, carefully placed finials, granite that probably was locally sourced, I'm going to guess, the stonework. Again, a sensual experience. You can hear the crunch of the gravel. It feels so good underfoot. And then it's just a textural extravaganza. Not a lot of color. I really like the restraint here. Not a lot of color, but some of the same notes of foliar hues that we saw at Hollister House. So I love the way one type of leaf and one type of texture insinuates itself into the other and comes up and grows through. And then these marvelous color echoes here of the emerging fern foliage, and then the foliage next to it in the astilbe. Really, really incredible. Okay, now here's a try this at home. So this beautiful, beautiful courtyard would be easy to replicate in another area because its lines are very, very straightforward. It's just two parallel borders that face one another, and then it is circumscribed by these two large arborvitae and two smaller arborvitaes at the top of the steps. So you can see how it is contained, how it's symmetrical, but how the borders are just perfectly asymmetrical. So I love the expression of this courtyard. So you come up out of this kind of narrow pathway, and then you have, which is very intimate and very lovely and close, and then you come up and you're kind of born into this beautiful larger area that almost is just kind of like a landing pad. Before then it narrows again and you come up into the secondary courtyard right in the foreground of the studio. Well, there's about a million try this at home type of things that we could be doing here. But I mean, look at this, the hens and chicks that are directly in the gravel. There's other things growing in the gravel, but this is the most surprising to me. I just love this effect. And then I see little pockets across the courtyard. I can see them there too. And it is just, I think the brilliance of these kind of garden tours is there is something everywhere you look. And you could probably go through this garden a million times, and every time you came, you could see something else. And you have to constantly remind yourself to look up, look down, look across, look for, look through. Look in so many different ways because you will miss out on something if you don't. So over here, these mammoth I don't know if these are green giant arbor. I'm not sure what these are, what variety they are. But here, over here, we have some of those hens and chicks. I am definitely stealing this idea for my own tiny gravel garden in the back. And then, like every great garden, a garden isn't just a static thing. It's a dynamic thing. It's experiential, and you feel immersed in the experience. And so this fountain right here is a perfect example of that. Everything is just, it's so beautifully choreographed. Restrained color palette up here that mimics what we saw below, but with different kinds of plantings here. Absolutely beautiful. Here there are some sedums. There are some things that probably don't need quite as much tending. However, the Silver Falls dichondra, I'm going to guess, eventually spills out over the edge and that will require some snipping, a haircut or two throughout the course of the season. But it's just magnificent. And then there's a form that I don't talk about very much. We talk about ovals, we talk about, linear shapes and forms, mounded shapes and forms, but I don't talk a lot about the importance of weeping forms. And it's used very, very effectively here. This looks like some kind of weeping yew, something that would be non-existent in Oklahoma, but is absolutely magical here. I could be wrong on IDing that plant, but it creates just fabulous layering, and it feels like it just is cascading down and towards the foreground. Again, a textural extravaganza with all sorts of different color echoes, starting in the foreground with the heucheras to the sedums in the back, and then to some different flowerings. I maybe even see some lupins in the distance, but it's just that cascading subtle color that also starts in the back and cascades down to the front, and maybe some blue sea holly that will join the show later on in the season. Okay, oh my gosh. Love, love, love these pears. And are they, oh, they're light. So these are real gourds. These are real gourds that have been patinaed, and they are absolutely brilliant. And look at this marvelous sculpture, iron sculpture of this leaf. A nod, indoor, outdoor living. Oh my word. Okay, this is a try this at home. I have some really large gourds, maybe not as large as these, but I think I am going to put this kind of aged gold patina on them. As Bunny said, she likes everything with patina. Well, Father, forgive me, I have lust in my heart about so many things in the garden, so many different places, but boy, wouldn't you like to have a studio like this? I have an exercise studio in it, as well as a creative studio. All of it is just very artfully decorated in true Bunny Williams style and in her signature palettes. Absolutely fabulous. Look at the tapestry behind the exercise bikes, exercise equipment. I think I could work out in here pretty effortlessly. I wouldn't even dread it. Okay, definitely my favorite space so far. This is her studio. You come up that very modern stairway with the glass railing, and this is where she worked during COVID. You can see over here all of her sample swatches, her very, very extensive library with all the perfect appointments. Wouldn't we all like to have a mood board like this over here? And then this is just a very, very warm, engaging space where you could let your creativity, your creative juices flow. Now it is used as a workspace, so she does some entertaining up here. She's got a small beverage area, but she emphatically didn't really want anything with a heating element, I understand, up here, because she didn't want it to be a kitchenette or a living space. Very much she wanted it to remain a workspace where she could work, entertain clients, hands-on kind of thing, but as always, very Bunny-esque, making sure that it was as comfortable as possible, appointed beautifully, organized beautifully, and very, very reminiscent of her style. I mean, this area is is just incredible. Look at this mammoth agave here in the corner. Look at these stone, I don't know if those would be, they wouldn't be pine cones. They look like some kind of tropical fruit. The surround of her extensive library. She obviously paints. She's just a creative force. And you can come up here and see how it relates to the other end of the studio with the A-frame. When she redid this place, I understand she wanted to take the structural beams out because she wanted nothing to impede the airiness of this space. If I have this correct, I may not, but she put these cables in. It's white, it's got layering, the lighting is incredible. Well, everything about it is pretty incredible. Okay, we're leaving the center courtyard now, and we are approaching the Woodland garden. There is a drive that comes up here, so this is not only an open area from a design standpoint, but it's a practical area as well. She can park up here because obviously she'll be bringing clients up here, canvases, different types of things, and from a practical standpoint, there is a drive and an approach to it. But off of a completely opposite to the drive up, there's the path that goes into the Woodland garden. I mean, just look at this magnificent slope and its sweep of Solomon's seal and fern and all sorts of different ground covers. Looks like some Falsa stilbe. And then there's all sorts of just different beautiful red buds. And here is something, here's a take it home for me. I have got to have a red bud of this variety. I don't know what variety it is. I've not seen it before. But look at that. Look at the new pinky growth. It's absolutely spectacular. So quiet. It is so serene in here. You can hear the birds. And even though this looks just so absolutely natural, trust me, I'm seeing things that would not be normally growing in a woodland garden. I see all sorts of coral bells. I see epimediums. I see just every variety of fern possible, forget-me-nots. You name it, if it wants a woodland environment, it's probably growing in here. And you talk about probably the garden that relates to the area the best. Geographically, I think this really feels like it does. And it's probably 15 degrees cooler in here than it is in other parts of the garden. I love the mossiness that grows on the benches. It repeats the mossiness on the huge boulders down in here. Well, my goodness, I could stroll coffee or wine in hand. For that matter, it could be a soda pop, and I would be absolutely happy. It is just spectacular. Oh my gosh. I am absolutely mesmerized by this. I love the railing. And as I understand it, this magical space down here was a natural inversion. Look at the little waterfall. But as I understand it, it was a natural dip, a natural inversion in the contours of the landscape. And she said, and it was just begging for a pond. And truly, truly, it was. I'm guessing that this is a manufactured, probably, little waterfall. But boy, it could not look more natural. It could not read more natural. It has very much of an Appalachian feel. And it is simply spectacular. Look here. I don't know if that's a trillium. That's a question of the day for me, a trillium. And that looks like some kind of, I don't know, a penstemon or a foxglove. And then there's still the hint, the shadow of hellebores that no doubt were spectacular a very short time ago. This is a magnificent, try this at home. I mean, look at this gentle suggestion or order not to go in this direction, not to follow this path. This is something that you could replicate yourself with the bamboo stakes. It just, again, imagine what it would look like. This versus a great big old yellow sign that says, "Do not enter." Well, it really just comes to me that this is such an American garden. It is just so much about the landscape. It's so much about New England. It is just steeped in history. And every reflection of something just seems to be a reflection of the best of America. So the faux bois everywhere, it just looks like such a natural part of the landscape. And no doubt, I'm sure many of these pieces came from her store in New York City, Triage. Her and John, I think, had an antique dealership or an antique shop nearby. So it not only speaks to the landscape itself, but it also speaks to her past and her both business past and her gardening life. It has just been edited out. All of the things that would impede the beauty of the plant itself have been edited out. And even I've noticed the way she has all of her trees pruned. You can so see the architecture of the trees, and she also does something that I love that's a little bit controversial, and that's pruning in with kind of a really dramatic lion's tail. And I love that. I have not found it really to be detrimental to the plant, and I think the effect is absolutely stunning. As I said, you have to look everywhere, and you have to look beyond and through, and look at that gorgeous statue up there as we pass through these beautiful rhododendrons. Look how gorgeous these dogwoods are. And the boxwoods just look as if they're rolling down the hill to the stone fence in the front. And I mean, I am completely seduced by this garden in so many different ways. And we've got more to see. But some of the stuff that we're going to be doing in the future, I'm just going to go quiet. I want you guys to really experience what it's like to see this property on your own, to walk it on your own. If I see something I really want to point out to you, then I will. But I also want you to feel how it is to be here without my talking over the beauty that surrounds us. And now we kind of come through this portal of cedars and back to the barn and the conservatory and the parterre just outside of the windows where Bunny just so graciously visited with us.
Oh my God.
And
Linda. Oh my God.
hello.
I love you.
And then there's, obviously this arbor here and this passage here. And then if you look back towards the conservatory over the beautifully clipped parterre of the boxwood, and then across the lawn at those arbors and on the way, look at the size of this clematis. Look at the size of this clematis. give you an idea of scale. So I love these kind of spaces. They're the liminal spaces between inside and outside that you can use for entertaining, and you're kind of a little bit of both. You're both inside the dwelling and you're out in the garden. This right now she has set up for hospitality for the garden tour. She's got water, she's got tea, she's got topiaries, which just makes me love her all the more. But one thing I have noticed that I'm really going to embrace, she has so much purple oxalis in so many different places, and I've noticed some of her her citrus fruit, kind of a mini orangerie on the other side. She's got potted citrus, and she's got it underplanted with this purple oxalis, and she's got pots of it absolutely everywhere, and it's a nod to the different kinds of purple, almost black appointments that she's got other places, like the passion vine right here, and talk about a color echo. Look at the interior of that. And then these black petunias. And then there's dark-leaved dahlias. And then, boy, I am loving my figs even more. I may have to thin mine out a little bit to really expose the gorgeous architecture and structure of the limbs themselves. But look at this. These areas with the container plantings and things just really, really, well, I just have to embrace the moment. This reminds me a little bit of the facade of P. Allen Smith's place at Moss Mountain Farm. The double level, the dimensionality of it really reminds me of that, and it's just beauty everywhere you look, in potted specimens, all sorts of things. But then look down, there's so much creeping thyme. I spy woolly thyme, the lichens, everything is aged, that perfect patina. And then in this courtyard, the corners are punctuated by these plantings. This is something that I have helped people do many, many times, and that is circumscribe and define a space with the use of potted specimens. It also softens the space, because even if you turn around and you look out into the expanse of the garden, even if the yew hedge weren't there, nevertheless, this area, this courtyard area, would be defined just with the placement of the boxwood topiaries, the boxwood balls in the containers. And then looking beyond at that rolling yew hedge and these mammoth yew topiary, well, it's just living art. Well, there's all sorts of garden tourists here today, and I feel like I am just absolutely engulfed in scent. I mean, the fragrance in here of this rose arbor, the rustic quality of it. You can barely tell the difference between the arbor itself and the canes that are growing up and through it. And there's this divine airiness to it, so you don't feel claustrophobic in any way. You can kind of see through the roses. And I will need to identify what this rose is, but its rambling, climbing habit is spectacular. That I love. And then over here, there's also some wisteria, and you can see it blooming in patches. So I'm sure it's also contributing its scent. And then more faux bois, that iron furniture. Hello, kitty. Hello, kitty. Okay, so we come off of the back of the house, And this is the first garden that she installed when she, and I hate the word installed, this is the first garden she started when she moved here. It's the sunken garden, and apparently it has evolved over time, entrances from both ways. Every change I think she did was perhaps made to exaggerate the drama of the topographical change, the fact that it is sunken, and there are parterres here with perennials that are just unbelievably magical. Notice how there are these fabulous metal tutors in the center of them that are works of art. They don't necessarily have to have anything growing on them to be magical in those spaces. And then again, there's that tension between the clipped boxwood and the abundance, the profusion of perennial bloom inside the confines of the boxwood rectangles. And then there's these giant arborvitae. If you lived in this area, as my friend John said, and you want really instant drama, then you could just do something like this. It would require maintenance, but things grow here so quickly that you could get instant drama like that. Not so much in my neck of the woods, but you could do a mini version of this if you wanted to kind of circumscribe a space. But the other thing, I think what speaks to me the most, I absolutely love all of this, but what makes this spectacular is imagine what this garden would look like without this stone wall at the top and the rhythm and repetition of what I'm guessing are zinc, some kind of metal planters that run across the top of the sunken garden on the stone wall. They're all planted identically, and boy, am I taking this formula down. You're gonna wanna do a screenshot this here because they are filled with artemisias, they're filled with different kinds of coreopsis, different silvery colors, those same purple notes. It's just absolutely magical. White petunias, and that is repeated in every one of the planters. So you've got the drama of the verticality of this, looks like even a form of Dusty Miller here. And it just kind of waves in the breeze. Again, it's experiential, there's movement. And then 1 is beautiful, but if 1 is beautiful, 6 is absolutely magnificent. And I'm having a little bit of allium envy here because look at how beautifully, despite all of her rain, look at how beautifully her alliums performed here. And they look to be maybe ambassador or gladiator, but look at how beautifully they performed here. And of course, hers are still fresh. Lots of lilies. It looks like lots of tall phlox. Magnificent, magnificent lilies, oriental lilies. Well, it's just absolutely fantastical. I don't know how else to describe it. With the boxwood balls, the boxwood segments, and each one in its individual state is fabulous, but in totality, all of them together, there's a synergy that is just impossible, I think, to really conceive unless you're here looking at it. Dinner time. I think little Danny J is going to need one of these. Charming, charming little play spaces. Oh look, it's the little potty training chair in there. Oh my gosh. And then we're not going to spend a lot of time in this area talking. I just want Stuart to catch the feel of it because we don't want to run the risk of capturing any children or anything like that we wouldn't have permission to shoot. But I mean, it's absolutely magical. It reminds me of the movie Klaus with all of the different kinds of birdhouses in it. And I can only imagine on the still of a morning what this must be like, filled with bird song and also filled with the sounds and the squeals and the laughter of little children. Well, boy, this is the kind of heartache that resonates with me. But look at what she has done to transform a garden tragedy into an absolute masterpiece. So this was a mammoth branch that came down off of a tree in the distance. And rather than remove it from the property, she crafted this gorgeous arbor, if you will, and then this fence that in this almost prehistoric way really accentuates just, and I think captures what the nature of a garden is, it's the agony and the ecstasy and the heartache of something that she has transformed into something that is just breathtakingly beautiful and is very, very much a storyline. This is what gardening is all about. Well, you don't normally see these kind of grand floral arrangements in your average barn. This is all cuttings, foliage, bloom, all from her garden, and it comes together in this very constant spry-esque arrangement that is billowy. It has all sorts of movements, and it's just the quintessential example of bringing the garden indoors. I mean, and it is mammoth. Would you say that's 3 to 4 feet wide, equally as tall, really, really magnificent, and a wonderful punctuation point on this desk. And the desk is mammoth enough that there's still room to actually do some work. Well, and then we're going to transition from the house up here to the greenhouse and the cutting garden, which is, of course, the origin of so many of the components in that gorgeous, gorgeous arrangement in the barn. And this has, I don't know, it's got to me a little bit more of a rustic feel, almost more of a, and I mean this in the most complimentary way, kind of a humility to it that some of the other places don't have, with its rustic weathered wood. And here there are not the grand boxwood hedges, the high maintenance boxwood hedges, but just simple edging, simple classic edging, tidy rows. Once again, I am rethinking all of my figs and how they are pruned, different ways they can be used indoors and out, what fabulous focal points they make. This is also a very, very open space. This has more of an Oklahoma vibe to it, to me. I can see this type of garden on the prairie. It's exposed to a lot more sun. I think because of that open feeling, you can really, really appreciate all of the different fixtures here that are both utilitarian and ornamental, like these bamboo teepees for the tomatoes, the cabbages, peppers, no doubt. Oh, basil, there it is. I was looking for it. She's got sweet peas over here, artemisias. But in a very, very flat space like this, I think it's really important that you have these punctuations of verticality throughout the garden, because it makes it read in a much more interestingly visual way, and it gives it dimension. Brussels sprouts. I mean, look here, this is something very reminiscent of my part of the country. We see and use lots of this kind of weathered metal. A lot of it is oil field equipment that is repurposed into the garden. And I love the way all of the metal is aged, you know, just so. It's got that beloved patina that Bunny talks about. I see barely a pest, barely a blemished leaf. The other, probably one of the reasons for that is that there's so much good air circulation in here. Unlike how I am at the cottage, everything here is pretty spaced out. Her larkspur is coming up so much later than mine. Mine is almost finished. And while mine grows in almost bush shapes, hers is very much individualized. She's got poppies along the edge, something that I'm trying to get started in my own garden. I definitely think I want some fennel. Her peonies look like they might just about be finished. She has a clear affection for lilies. Looks like Asiatics and Orientals. All sorts of apricot-colored or citrus-colored poppies that have bloomed and that are coming into bloom. Zinnias, greens, uninterrupted soldiers of different kinds of lettuces and things. I spy some Love in the Mist, Nigella, more sweet peas over here, some celosia. I bet all of this, as she's, you know, fodder for her vase, fodder for the cutting garden, or for the cuttings for her indoor gardens, I should say. Sunflowers. And it's not just the blooms, it's the foliage as well. And then we come full circle, because here are these absolutely unbelievable delphinium that we saw in the indoor arrangement. How she was able to cut any of them. It always breaks my heart to cut things of such beauty, but obviously she had a few to spare. This is a fabulous greenhouse of curiosities. I mean, look at some of these specimens here, most of which I am not familiar with. But the unique form, the unique growing pattern. Look here. Just so many. Remember to always look up. Look at this. Look at this cacti. And you know what? I have something similar to this. This is some form of fishbone cactus. Different variety perhaps than I have. And then of course all of the topiary, the cypress, the lavenders. It smells unbelievable in here. And I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a quiet strain of classical music. Okay, now I don't know what's in this next room, but I have been warned. I have been warned that I might pass out. So I'm not sure, but we need to go in there and see what it is. And I'll try to remain upright. Look at the lavender, look at the, oh my goodness. Because don't we all need a basket room? Don't we all need a basket room?
I have a little tiny shed that stops here. And I'm thinking, even just whitewash it, put a little bench there, pop a window in.
Be wonderful. And look up here. Here's a great try this at home, gentlemen, where you take some kind of woven basket or chandelier, and it's got the dried plumes and blooms of oak leaf hydrangea and different grasses. This area, if you haven't been to Moss Mountain, have you been to Moss Mountain Farm? P. Allen Smith's home.
Oh,
He's got you know, a place like this that's
Another
just
trip.
exceptional, and I would just love to have a storage area like this. So I'm covetous of not only the baskets, but of just all the space, all the treasures. It didn't disappoint. Well, as much as I hate to leave, it is time to say goodbye to this exceptional garden. I'm going to say goodbye to the poultry. I'm going to say goodbye to the topiaries, to the baskets, to all of the amazing gardens. But mostly I want to say goodbye to Bunny, whose graciousness and hospitality is just beyond measure, to allow us into her home, to enjoy these spaces and get a little glimpse of how she sees the world. And indeed, we have gotten that today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you ever have a chance, you need to come to Falls Village and see Bunny Williams' home and gardens.